Entering and cleaning data. Now we are going to practice entering data into SPSS. To complete this tutorial, you will need the demographic data entry.save SPSS file, which contains predefined variables. You will also need the sample survey file, which contains an example of a set of completed surveys. You may want to print out the sample surveys or have them displayed partially on your screen to avoid the cumbersome task of switching between screens for each data entry, as there will be many. Once downloaded, open the demographic data entry.save file to begin this tutorial. Let's start by viewing the Data View pane of the SPSS Data Editor window. As stated in a previous module, the Data View pane of the Data Editor window is used to enter data. Now it is displayed as an empty spreadsheet with variable names appearing as the column headings. Note that there are 9 variable column headings. 1 for participant ID, and 1 for each of the 8 question items from our survey. Let's click on Variable View to get a more detailed look concerning the variables in this dataset. As you can see, each variable corresponds to the data in our survey, with variable names listed on each row. This screen is important as it reminds us of what our variables stand for and how their values are coded. You cannot begin entering data until you are familiar with the value codes associated with each variable. Knowing what the value codes are tells you how to enter data from an external data source, such as the surveys we will use for this exercise. Note that in this example, we have 9 variables, which include ID for participant ID number, age for age of participant, sex for sex of participant, marital status for marital status of participant, employed for employment status of participant, education for highest level of education, housing for housing status of participant, living W for number of people living with participant, and F support for main source of financial support. Note that you can always check the value codes for each of the categorical variables in the dataset by clicking under the Values column and the Call button in the Values cell for the variable of interest, in this case, sex. We can see that there are 3 value codes, 1 through 3, 1 indicating male, 2 indicating female, and 3 indicating other. Also note that there are no value codes for age and ID, as they are only entered in as numbers. So let's say you got your hands on some data and you want to enter it. To begin entering data, click on the Data View tab of the Data Editor window. When entering data, you should always enter it in one survey at a time, completing each row before moving on to the other. Recall that each row represents a case. In this case, each case is a participant or completed survey. Let's start with the survey completed by participant ID number 1. Refer to the sample of completed surveys for this exercise. To enter data from our first participant, click on the cell under ID of the first row and enter 1. Then click Tab or press Tab on your keyboard to move on to the next column. Now, since our first participant reported their age at 22, type in 22 under Age and tab over to the next column. Type in 2 under the column labeled Sex, since our first participant reported being female, and we coded our variable sex, 1 for male and 2 for female, and 3 for other. Tab over under the marital variable and type in 1, since our participant reported being single. Type in 5 under the column labeled Employ. Type in 3 under the column labeled Education, since our respondent reported having a college degree as her highest level of education. Type in 2 under Housing, as the participant reported living at her parents' house, and be sure to tab over. And type in 1 under Living W. Type in 2 under F Support. And now we've entered data from our first completed survey. After you're done, you can click over to this second row under ID to begin entering data from our second participant. Now we can move on to this row and do it a little faster this time. So again, use the survey to enter the data for our second participant. Since this participant ID is number 2, we'll just enter 2. Their participant reported being 25 for age. We'll put in 2 for sex, 1 for marital, 2 for employed, 4 for education, 3 for housing, 1 for living W, and 1 for F support. As you can see, our data set contains data from 2 cases. Recall that since all of our variables are numeric types, you see no words in our spreadsheet. If we had created a string variable requiring words, say from an open-ended question, we would see some responses containing letters. Although numbers are displayed for our categorical variables, SPSS will know what the numbers correspond to. Now that we've entered in the first 2 surveys together, why don't you pause the video and enter in the remaining completed surveys on your own? Then come back and we'll see what you got.